Hello friends, Swaroop here. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk about PHP Ajax function call. Well, Ajax is not the part of PHP, rather it's a part of jQuery, which is a library of JavaScript. But how am I going to implement Ajax in PHP? That's what I am supposed to demonstrate in this video series. What I have done over here is I have got a file called some.html and a folder called JS. So if I go inside this folder JS, I will find that there is the library of jQuery which I have downloaded from the website jQuery.com. And I also have a PHP file right over here. So my HTML page would be taking some data and then it will forward the data to the PHP, and the PHP eventually will again send me a response back to my HTML. So the data going in and out is what we are going to see in this video series, but that will be making use of something called Ajax. So you might be wondering what Ajax is. So before I start to talk about this, let me show you the source code of the program that will give you an idea of how Ajax is going to work. So first I'm going to open the sum.html file. Since I'm making use of Ajax, so I have to give a call to the jQuery library. That has to be done at the very beginning. And now I'm making use of a form tag of HTML because form is a container within which you will be having all the GUI element. So let me even run the program so that you can have a clue about what I'm talking. So here you can see that there is a text box where the user is supposed to provide the input. So let's assume that I'm providing the input called 33, and there's another text box where the user is supposed to provide the next input. So let's come to the code once again. I have a form tag and the ID of the form is called my form. You are free to choose whatever name you want for a given form. Always remember, form is a container within which the GUI component of the HTML elements will reside. I'm making use of the inline CSS just to give a very better look. Here is a statement, my enter first number, which you can see right over here, enter first number. And then I have created a text box, input type text. I've given the name of the first text box as num1 and even the ID as num1 because that's how we are going to identify this particular resource. So when the user is going to provide some input right over here, I have to track by the name of the ID of the respective text box. And after that, I have created the next line, and then I have created the next text box. In a similar way, I have given the name and the ID to the respective text box. It's very simple. Then I have given a call to a button, and the button is going to invoke an event called onClick. So when the user is going to click the button, this particular onClick event will be fired, which eventually will be giving a call to a JavaScript function by the name calculate. That's the term which I have chosen over here. Again, the inline CSS is following over here, the width of the box, I mean to say the button, the height of the button, the font size, at what alignment it would be, how much space I'm leaving. If I bring my mouse pointer, it will turn the cursor into a pointer type. That's all. So when the user is going to click the button, the event that will be fired is on click and the respective function will be fired. So the control will come over here. But hang on, before we go over here, I just need to steal your attention at this particular line. If you see over here, I have created something called div. What this div is all about. It is a way of identifying a specific element within the given page with a specific ID. So this particular element has an ID called my data. At this point of time, this particular div tag is empty. You might be wondering what I'm supposed to do with an empty div tag. Don't worry, you will get the clue later on. So just keep it in mind that there is a particular element residing in your page which has got an ID by the name called my data, and currently it holds nothing. So now the control goes to the function calculate. The calculate function comes over here. The very first task what I'm supposed to do is that I'm supposed to receive the following values from the respective text box, and that's what I'm doing with the help of jQuery. Remember, whenever you are using a jQuery, dollar symbol will be at the very beginning. I repeat again, dollar symbolizes you are using jQuery. Now you are fetching the value from the respective text box. There are two ways by which you can fetch the value. I'm using the convention of ID of ID. So since I'm using ID, that has to be indicated with the hash sign. So whenever ID will be used for retrieving the value from a text box, you will be using hash. In case of name, you are going to use something else. So respectively, you can make use of this particular ID. Okay, so I'm using the ID mechanism of retrieving the value, and once I have identified which element I will be using for fetching the value, I have to give a call to another JavaScript function called val. So val is a function of JavaScript which will be responsible for picking up the value from the respective text box, and after that store it into JavaScript variable. There is a keyword called var that symbolizes that this particular is a JavaScript variable. In the same way, I'm retrieving the content from the second text box through the help of ID, and since I'm using jQuery, so I'm writing dollar, and since I'm using ID, so I'm writing hash. Val is a function of jQuery for retrieving the value from the text box and store into it into a JavaScript variable. Now comes the portion of Ajax, which is the most crucial part. If you see, this is a dollar is there, so it means that the Ajax is an inbuilt function of jQuery. Okay. Now Ajax has got certain parameters, and these parameters are very important, and you have to remember the parameter name. So let me discuss all about the parameters which you can see. The very first parameter is called URL. That means I am going to connect my front end with the back end. So there is a particular page by the name called data send, which you can see even in the folder data send is right over here. I'm going to connect to this particular page. That means my front end is connecting to a back end page. So through the help of URL, we will be navigating from one page to another. Now while we are navigating from one page to another, obviously we have to provide some form of encryption. So the type represents what encryption methodology you will be applying while you are traversing from one page to another. Now definitely you will not go to the next page, the server side page empty hand. Obviously you will carry some data, otherwise what's the point of going to that particular page? So when you are traversing from the front end to the back end, this is the portion which we will call it as a JSON, JavaScript object notation. So you are passing a JSON object where we have got something in the form of a key value pair. Don't worry, we will talk about this much later on in the upcoming videos. So just for a while, remember that this is a JSON object which consists of a key by the name called num1 and the value which is also num1. So this num1 which you have defined over here, the num1 as a variable comes as a value over here which eventually been assigned as a key over here. I repeat again, the variable num2 is right over here as a variable which also been treated as a key for this particular JSON object. So in the form of a JSON object, we are going to transmit our value so that individually we don't need to transmit, rather we can transmit all together at one go. So that's the target. And lastly, we also have another parameter that is called data type, when what type of response the server is going to send back to the client side. Okay, as I already told you, first the value from the HTML will go to the PHP, and then PHP will calculate and will send back the result to the HTML. So when the PHP is going to send back the result, what type of representation it would be, that representation we are calling it as, it would be a type HTML. It's not the only way of representing. In the upcoming days we might see even some form of JSON representation as well. Okay, so do remember, this is the response that I'm going to get from my PHP back to the client side. Now there is also another argument called success, but I will halt over here. Why? Because after the execution of the first four arguments, your control will not execute this particular function. Instead, the control will leave this particular page. I mean to say, from sum.html, it will navigate to data send.php. So that means a particular parameter is not going to be executed. And this is what actually known as asynchronous. Asynchronous, the letter A of the word Ajax represents asynchronous. Asynchronous means all the lines are not going to be executed sequentially. Rather, there will be a partial execution. So partially it has executed these four arguments, and the control is now navigating to the next page. After completion of the tasks of this particular page, the control will come back over here and it will resume the leftover code. So this particular segment will then be executed. But right now we are in a halt state, and the control will now move to this particular page. Remember, this is the page where I'm supposed to go, what encryption I will be following, what are the stuff I'm going to carry, and what will be the response that will be coming from the server to the front end. These are the four arguments. So now the control comes to this particular page. Eventually I have sent the following respective keys which I need to receive them. So this is a super global variable which will be used, super global variable which will be used for receiving the value. whatever the key I have specified over here, I have retained those keys. So this key will now be assigned into our PHP variable. Now you might be wondering that for jQuery I'm using dollar, and the same way for PHP as well I have to use dollar. There will be no confusion because we are using the PHP script, and even the file name is also having the extension .php. So that will be sufficient enough to distinguish that this dollar variable is not a variable of jQuery, instead it's a variable of PHP. So through the help of the key, I have received the first value in the PHP variable. With the help of the key, I do receive the second value as well. And now I'm going for printing the statement, and along with the printing I'm going for concatenation with the dot operator. At the same time I'm calculating the result as well. So this entire string got framed. Now I'm going to redirect this particular string back to my HTML page. Once I'm redirecting this particular statement back to the HTML page, that was the response which I was talking about. The response is in the form of an HTML. Now this particular response, I need to receive it in my front end, and that's where the last argument comes in picture, that is called success. Success gives a call to a function, and the function has a parameter called data. The data that is going to come from the PHP will get stored right inside this argument. Okay, so the data will be holding the response from the PHP. And once I have hold this response, now I need to populate, I need to show this response to my HTML page, and for that reason this particular statement comes in picture. Hold on, what this statement is all about. Remember, there was some empty div tag which I have created, my data. Now this particular tag I'm going to use with the help of jQuery function called HTML. I'm going to dump the statement which I have received from my PHP into this div tag, and that's how we will be able to see the content right over here. That's the most interesting thing. Okay, that was the reason why I have given the identification to this particular element. Otherwise, how will I figure out where am I supposed to show the output? Now after I did that, I'm going to clean the value of the first text box, and I don't want to retain the first text box. So if you see over here, my form, that was the name of the ID of the form, and since this particular text box is the first element, so I will be using the 0 as a identification that I will be clearing off, and that's how my entire Ajax function comes to an end. So Ajax is a function, and its parameters are playing the crucial role. Remember, it's in the form of asynchronous. Not all the time the values, all the argument will be executed sequentially. Instead, a part of the argument will be left off for the later execution. So now we are free to go and execute the program. So I've already provided the respective values. So if I click the sum function, the value will be forwarded into the text box, I'm going to say into the PHP page, and eventually all the data will then be forwarded back to my HTML. Point to be noted over here is I'm not reloading the entire page, I'm just reloading a part of it, and the exact page remains all the same. So the sum.html was the HTML page, front end page, but the user has no clue that there was also a backend page involved because the reloading didn't take place. So let me try out once more time. So this is the value I'm giving to my HTML page, sum.html. If I click this, my page remains as it is, only the portion of this element is getting changed, and that's what all about Ajax. So I hope you got a clue how Ajax is going to work. Don't worry, in the upcoming days I'm going to create more videos on this regard. So keep watching my video. Until then, have a nice time. Thank you so much.